emotional damage.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to
Where's the button? I can't find the button. Why is this day the way it is?
Always the red button.
It's not. It's not. It's not a red button at all. Sorry, Taylor. I gotta go. Okay. Sorry. I had a moment. It's Wednesday. It is time for another Mattriarchy. I am your host. Unflagged, unfazed, unbothered, Matthew Rhys. I am joined by the usual gang of folks and somebody who has not been here in a spell of the metal. I'm so glad you could make it today, man.
You know, I didn't make it at the end of that one like 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That is true. But I'm glad you're able to today. Though we are doing my favorite spy comic, which, if you guys have been following the channel for any length of time, you might have noticed the my favorite theme. In fact, if you go down the channel, there's a playlist, so you can check out all of the my favorite books or shows. But what the plan, what the conceit of the my favorite shows are that we, each of us, assign each other our favorite whatever. And then we discuss about, why I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Yeah, and of course, we all have that opinion. But today, we actually read 5 spy stories because Twitless was going to try to make it, but he had the real life impinged upon him, and he wasn't able to make it. So we'll have to save his excellent recommendation for another show because. It's good.
Well, I mean, I guess it's lucky for me. I didn't get around to reading his either.
It's right here.
I just didn't get to.
This is the one he was suggesting. Look at this thing. Look at this puppy. This is such a good book. It's got the perfect thing. I also read Pennyworth, the Alfred Pennyworth spy comic. And it was a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I'm disappointed.
My
we
condolences.
get to talk about that.
Yeah. It's man, it started really strong. I bought like the first 3 issues, and I bought the whole rest of the series just because I loved the first ones, and I got busy, didn't get to read them. I sat down to read them like last Thursday. I was just like, I don't like it. I don't like it.
But it's all right because I am okay with not having 75% of our entries tonight all be superhero comics.
That's right. Well, this is actually not a superhero comic. That Pennyworth is a spy comic in a superhero universe.
Right.
It is definitely not a superhero comic. Anyhow, so I don't know who we want to go first.
I don't know if
anybody wants to go first. Okay, Cartoonicus is
starting. Yeah.
All right. So let me get that one loaded up here.
Well, I'll have here. Hold on. No.
Or did you already have
I'll share
visual aids prepared?
Yeah.
Because I do.
But first, I do want to talk about something. And about a month ago, we did our general talk about spies and comics overall, right?
Yes.
And we had a fairly large conversation, the debate over whether or not the classic Bondian-like super spy is, in fact, a superhero in disguise, right?
Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that I really am sad that Twitless couldn't make it, because you and he were like at each other's throats on the subject, and I like to watch that kind of thing.
No, I don't think.
Well, I think I'm also on Twitless.
We did have very different ideas, but afterward, I started thinking about this, and I did come to more of a general idea about the whole thing. And I think what we need to do is to separate, because I'll just out it right now. You already said Twitless's would have been Super Spy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super Spy takes place during World War II.
Yes, and despite the name, no superheroes at all.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It is all
So
spies.
basically, if we look at the sliding scale of the genre, Bond is one extreme, and this book is on the other. As far as Bond is basically a fantasy, and Super Spy shows us what it's like. What did you do?
I spoiled it.
To actually have to deal with spying, right? The thing is, I realize what we need to do is we have to be able to separate the concept of the spy from the secret agent. And what I mean is, spies have, as this book shows, existed since the beginning of time, right? From the moment any military leader realized I can get an up on the other military if I know something about them, right? The spy was born. And they have existed as a result as a weapon. That's what the spies are. They're a weapon.
Oh yeah, we have recorded evidence. I mean,
right.
we sent spies into Jericho in the Old Testament.
Right.
So
spies are
also. I want to interrupt you for just a second. I want to ask Dave's question. No, not a rerun. But I just reused the thumbnail out of. I was very cheap with my time this week, and so only the thumbnail is used. Although, yeah. So that's it. Not a rerun. We're not.
So at least one of the comics on the thumbnail is being
sequel.
talked about today.
Yes. Only one of the comics gets talked about. Anyway, sorry there, cartoon.
But so yeah, the spy is a weapon of war, right? It is used by a military against another military to win a war. This has been the case throughout all of history, all the way up through World War II, right? Where it was probably used more than ever. And I noticed that in comics, spies really didn't get much attention, despite their incredible use during the war. You know who did get a ton of attention during World War II? Superheroes, right?
Well, and here's kind of the other side of it, right? There were not back in the golden age, there were not spy comics, but there was a subgenre within superhero comics of spy smashers. Right?
That's true.
There were a lot of, in fact, and on radio, part of the Green Hornet's whole shtick was that he was a spy smasher. There was Spy Master from Fawcett Comics, and there was, I can't think of any at the other minute, they're escaping me, but there was a whole series of spy smasher books where spies were always the bad guys and the bold heroes were not spies.
Right. And it makes sense when you realize, hey, my brother's in the comments there. Hey, Shep, how's it going? I forgot he was going to watch tonight. So yeah, it makes sense that superheroes would be popular back then when we were up against not one, but two seemingly unstoppable superpowers across the seas, right? And so the only thing that can stand up against that is a hero with an equal amount of power. And so we sent all our superheroes across the sea to fight World War II. It's nice when you have a guy who can just smash through all their tanks, right? Who can walk up and sock Adolf Hitler right in the face, right?
Never happened in the comic.
Yeah, I know. And yet, that's the moment that we remember, right? So, interestingly enough, World War II did end with that kind of power being unleashed, just not in the way we expected. It was called the atomic bomb.
Very good observation.
All of a sudden, we found ourselves in a very new kind of war, one that could not be won by walking in and punching someone, right? Technically, one that can't be won at all. The only answer to an atomic war is not to play, right? If anybody plays, we all lose. The only way to try to fight a war like this had to be incredibly secret, right? The new hero was a subtle one. He didn't get credit for being what he was. He had to do everything in secret. He had to do everything on the down low. The new hero that was born, the second the intelligence agency was a thing, totally changed. The secret agent was now no longer a weapon to be used by a military to win a war. It was the exact opposite. It was a weapon to prevent war. It's a weapon used by a government against another government, right? And so the problem with this is you can't have your no, I have to say, immediately throughout both the 60s and the 70s, they're the entirety of the Cold War practically, you're going to see the spy genre just explode, right? It became the most popular genre, and I realized why. That was just like the superhero had been the thing that was going to protect us from the Japanese and the Germans. The spy was going to be the thing that could protect us from the atomic bomb. The problem is you can't have your spy walking up and socking Adolf Hitler in the face. You can't have him flying around with a nice big emblem on his chest to bring people hope. And so I don't know if this was on purpose, but it didn't take long for James Bond to come along and re-infuse the superhero back into the genre. And that's where I see the separation. That from that moment on, of course, like I said last time, everybody copied Bond. And so in a way, that superhero stuff does exist in a large majority of the genre. But it's about that difference between whether you're actually focusing on what spies really do or whether you're focusing on that fantasy that James Bond created. And so the interesting thing was when looking for, now, when you look at movies, there are spy movies everywhere. But when I found myself trying to find my favorite entry for what is my favorite genre, man, is there just not a lot of spy stuff out there. And the stuff that was out there was all superhero stuff. Right? And I'm like, I'm not doing this. Okay. I am not going to go, across the line and choose Batman or X-Men or something. I want a real spy genre here. Right. And so just when I'm finally going to share my screen here. Where is it?
While you're doing that, I want a little answer to Fizz. James Bond is more a male sex fantasy than a hero anyway, at least in the movies. That it's not, honestly, it's not just the movies, right? I've only read one James Bond book, and it was enough to cool me to Ian Fleming's writing forever.
He is worse than the books, yeah.
It was The Spy Who Loved Me, and it was atrocious. That was a horrible, horrible book. It was, oh my gosh, it was so bad.
I would say though,
and it really wasn't a spy story either, because the story was James Bond against the mafia with a trollop caught in the midst who had fled Europe in the wake of her own failed sexual escapades, and had tried to start a new life in America, and then gets caught up with the mob who were.
And that's completely different from what the movie is like. I really feel the movies are the ones that brought the superhero-ness to the genre, not the books.
I think you're right. I do think you're right.
Yeah. But if you want some really good spy stories, you want stuff that's like Bond, but not plagued with a lot of the problems Bond has. You actually have to go earlier to the 30s, and there was a U.S. pulp magazine called Secret Agent X that was pretty much all espionage.
And they had some comic adaptations of Secret Agent X, and I was trying to remember the name of that. I couldn't think of what it was.
Secret Agent X is the best.
Yeah.
So anyway, put up my image here, because here I am thinking about trying to find an actual spy comic, and just when I was about to choose a Rocky and Bullwinkle comic about Boris and Natasha rigging an election.
Which let's face it, Rocky and Bullwinkle is some classic grade A material.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
Boris and Natasha are spies. That's what they are. Yeah. So, yeah.
And just as that was going to happen, I had to go and remember that this piece of work exists. Never in a million years would I have expected that my favorite anything comic would ever be a Deadpool comic. This is the most horrifying moment of my life.
That's
so,
amazing.
Why did I choose this comic? Because in fact, I want to go back. How did you get? You must have just skipped ahead, but I wanted you to take a look at the image of the last issue here. It says it all. This comic accurately shows both sides of what I've been talking about, as it is a superhero comic, yet it accurately depicts that Bondian spy genre better than anything else I found out there. So it has both, right? You have Deadpool acting as a secret agent, so he's a superhero, but he's also a spy, right? Mm-hmm. This image shows both sides of it, right?
Well, and I found it.
End, this basically Bond character on the other. Go ahead.
I was going to say I found it particularly appropriate too, because Wade started. Well, he started as a bit character that Liefeld created,
right?
But once they came up with a backstory for him, his backstory was as somebody from the teams, somebody with an espionage background. And so that was one of these things where he wasn't necessarily the Bond kind of spy, but was still within that intelligence community thing before his accident and before all that. So that was one of the things I thought was when you first pitched this idea, I was like, okay, I could see this. I could see that being a thing.
You'll also notice
I somehow was not prepared for this story.
Oh, yes. You'll also notice, and this is the great thing. We're only really going to talk about the first and last issue tonight, but I do want to go over every cover because they do such a good job of recreating ideas that from other spy movies, right? This is very clearly just your classic James Bond look with the crossed arms and the gun. Let's see, issue 2.
Okay, I got to address Fizz.
We got our laser sharks in there, right?
Yeah, the laser sharks, which was not a thing. Like I know,
was that right?
Before Austin Powers.
No, the funny thing is, lasers are a thing, and sharks are totally a thing.
Right,
it was Austin Powers who put them together.
That's what I thought. Right. So, the Fizz's comment: Tom King wrote a Human Target comic, but it wasn't a spy story. Tom just wanted to tear down more superheroes. Yes, and what Tom King did with I love the Human Target is such a cool idea, and I just cannot that guy. What is his deal? What honestly is his deal?
I never read the comic. I watched the show.
2 seasons. I have not read any of the solo stuff. But he did backups in a bunch of stuff, and I just loved every Human Target backup I read.
No, gotcha.
But same with Nemesis, which we'll talk about Nemesis later. But
this one is really good. I love this. One of the most classic Bond moments ever, compounded by the fact that Deadpool is unkillable, so you can just do this to him all day. That's brilliant.
I almost don't want to read the stories. I just want to look at all the gag covers.
Yeah, right. Because unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, nothing you see on any of these covers happens in the actual story, right?
Well, except for Deadpool in a tuxedo,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But finally, this one, I don't know if you noticed the reference to Spy versus Spy here. Mm-hmm. You've got black versus white. You've got white on black on one side and white on the other side. You've got one with a knife, one with a gun. But of course, because it's Deadpool, it's this massive, ridiculously oversized gun.
Little mini McNuke.
Everything is just so creative about these covers. I love it. All right, but let's get started here, and you're going to see why it works so well for Deadpool to be in this kind of thing here.
Let me actually see. I think that if I share what I have, it'll be better because it'll zoom in more organically on the thing.
Okay, but I'm going to skip ahead, actually. This first scene wasn't really that important to what we're going to talk about. I'm going to start where he's at home in his apartment here.
Yeah, there we go. That is much larger. I like it. Okay.
So actually, you want to start on issue number 1.
Oh, I grabbed the wrong screen share. Hang on.
Whoops.
I had both of them open here, and I did. That was me thing. The best run show on YouTube. Don't forget. That's the one.
Clearly, we're still more efficient than the U.S. government.
Barr is buried in hell.
All right. Oh gosh, that's a good way of saying that. So yeah, Deadpool gets a
Although that's an appropriate foreshadowing for something in issue 6.
So yeah, Deadpool gets a classic job. My husband is cheating on me. I need you to rub him out, right? And so he needs the money. He goes to this casino, and this character is very, very clearly James Bond. In fact, they even gave him the initials JB, right? He's doing his whole, charming James Bond thing. Deadpool comes along, tries to assassinate him,
and we have the GoldenEye thing happen.
Not the GoldenEye, it's the Bond thing.
Yeah,
we get the barrel scene, and he totally hits him and everything, which is great again because he's Deadpool. They can do that and just keep on going, right? So Deadpool gets in there. He's
got the
his
watch
own against them. Surprisingly, right? This guy is really good at what he does. Then he shoots rockets out of his watch, right?
Yep.
And Deadpool immediately noticed this and said, "You must be a secret agent." This was the moment I realized how Deadpool is perfect for getting the spy genre into a superhero comic. It's his ability to break the fourth wall. Deadpool would understand genre. He knows when he is in a spy story. Oh, this is about to get good, right? Okay. So they fight more, and then the bomb goes off. James Bond character appears to be hurt. Suddenly, Deadpool blacks out, right? And he wakes up. He finds that this Bond character has died. They take one look at his face, and they assume it's him who has been burned by the fire. And it's the classic mistaken identity issue. So having no life and no money, he just goes along with it and takes up the identity of Jace Burns here, right? Congratulations, Deadpool. You have genre hopped. You are now a secret agent. Look, he's even doing like the suave thing there, right? Okay, we're really going to skip ahead because a lot of the stuff, I mean, do read it, but it can easily be skipped over, as basically what happens is, he gets involved in this life. I will point out one part. I'm trying to remember which issue it was. Was it in issue 2? Might have been in issue 3 here, where he points out that, the spy agency is, so well staffed, and they've got all this money that, that they're being funded with, and they've got cool gadgets and stuff. And it's like, this is so much better a life than he's used to, right? He's been desperately trying to pay the bills off these tiny little jobs he's getting. So it was easy for him to, to see the opportunity and be like, oh, this is so much better than my normal life. That was an interesting thing to realize about the spy genre, especially with the age of the secret agent and the intelligence agency, is so many of your superheroes, your Peter Parkers and such, are always these very poor off people who have a zillion problems, and being a superhero just accentuates those problems. Spies, on the other hand, usually have everything going for them. They've got the entire budget of a government behind them, right? And so it was neat seeing that comparison of genres and why that would be so attractive to him to keep up this charade. Anyway, we're actually going to skip ahead to where, so basically, long story short, he gets involved with some cultists who want to use this portal to bring in, the ultimate evil, destructive, demonic entity to destroy the world. He pretends to go along with them for a little while, then betrays them and goes back to the agency to tell them what's up. And let's see here. Right at the end, excuse me.
And so the one of the things they have is that there is an evil organization called Gorgon.
Right.
And they have discovered a stone that they believe to be the original rock that creation was built on. And so that's a plot point on it. But in the beginning of issue 6, we get into this thing where we find out that it was actually Jace Burns, the real Jace Burns, who survived the original attack.
Well, that's where I was going to get. Yep. This guy right here, I'm not sure where you are. You're
I'm in issue 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically the guy who is M in this version of the universe turns out to be Jace Burns in disguise. He was the one who called the hit on himself so that he could disappear. Because what happened was this whole agency is not a spy agency at all. It's one of these just minor government things going on.
Yeah, he works for the USDA.
Yeah.
And in the USDA, here's an interesting little factoid for people that don't know. Because I know somebody who went to work for the USDA as a law enforcement official. The USDA legitimately has their own cops. And they do, they work with the DEA, they work with the FDA, they work with, they do enforcement, and they do things that people that are moving plants in and out of the country, they inspect them. Some USDA and FDA agents are in fact armed.
Right.
So the idea that there is a super spy who is working for the Risk Management Agency subdivision of the U.S. Department of Agriculture is not far from the truth.
Well, and their whole deal was that they were afraid they were about to be found out, right? And then they cut their funding, and then this.
But here's the funny thing. One thing I want to go ahead and I want to get a little metatextual on this. Mm-hmm. That you introduced us to this comic the week after all of the U.S. aid slush fund stuff has been revealed to have been part of these, and all of the waste and everything. And there's definitely been counterintelligence stuff that's being funded by all of this sort of foreign influence stuff. And so the idea that you're like, oh no, it's the USDA's risk management agency. They're really they're secretly super spies and they're stealing government money so they can enrich themselves. Yeah. No friggin' joke.
Yep. Right. But then tragedy struck, as you see in this image, and they discovered just how vulnerable they could be. Right. Mm-hmm. His boss is dead, and so he figures he needs to take control and rework this agency into something that works. So he has to become M. And in order to become M, he has to disappear. So he himself called the hit from Deadpool on himself so he could pretend to die so he could then become his own boss and replaced him with Deadpool. This is great. First of all, as soon as he died in the beginning, I was already wondering if he was actually going to come back and if it was going to be a ruse. I was so happy to see that was the case. And then no sooner do we discover that than our other character, Penny, basically Moneypenny, turns out to be the double agent. And she's working for the cult.
Yeah, right? She's been working with Gorgon the entire time.
Ah, great. Darn it. Right. Okay, so they have the rock. Here we go. They're going to go ahead and remake the universe, basically, with it, is the way they see it. Deadpool decides to.
And here's the side note. One of the things we got to talk about here too, because we often talk about religion in comics, and one of the things that they harp on is that these people that are part of Gorgon all believe that the universe they live in was some sort of mistake put out by some sort of demiurge, some sort of evil deity who exists to torment them. And so if they can capture the original rock, then they could recreate the universe in their image, right?
Right.
And it's this chunk of graphite. This chunk of graphite is the original stone that the universe is made from.
Yeah. So
are you picking it up yet, folks? It's this chunk of graphite from which the universe is made. I'm gonna lay it out right there.
So how does Deadpool fight this chunk of graphite? And these people want to remake the universe in their own image? First of all, he pulls their own trick on them, pretends to be with them. It's like, I want to just get. You're right. This universe stinks. Then he uses a gadget he'd gotten earlier to hack their phones, thus changing how they interact with this rock. And he calls on none other than the one above all himself. And I love that once again, the one above all is portrayed as an artist drawing this, right? So you want to talk about remaking the universe. He just pulls out the big guns. And once again, who had better but Deadpool to break the fourth wall in the ultimate possible way by literally having the artist come in with a giant pencil and reshaping the universe. I love this.
See, like, there's the hand of within space, and he says, "Hey, look, they're trying to steal your pencil, boss."
Right? And he even says, like, Deadpool, with you, I never really know what I'm going to do. I just do it. Which I imagine is exactly how Deadpool comics get written, right? It's like, so, what you want to do today? I don't know. What you want to do, All right, now don't start that again.
How does he erase the inks and paint?
He just literally erases the portal they were trying to open, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Gets rid of it.
Yeah, okay. You can't expect too much out of this gag metal.
I expect literally the world of it.
Boom. All right, so now I love this part too. Deadpool is so tired of all this. He gets a gun, and now it's like they show you how specifically how he deals with each and every person, right? Hey, stop, blam. Hey, stop, blam. Hey, stop, blam. Hey, stop, stab. Right? And then he gets to like, what is it? It's too small to see. I can't remember what the phone call is. I think he gets him fired.
He calls it's like the USDA, the Secretary of the Agriculture or whatever. And they're like, I'm closing the department down.
Right. Blam, blam, blam. Phone call. Rat it out. Right?
And then, of course, there's the big escape, and the Gorgon who's behind it all, the Medusa who's behind it all, is actually just the Gray Man who's there for a job. Yeah. He's just...
This part funny. I didn't really get, except I assume it may just be, them referencing that "I'll get you next time" gadget type of.
There's definitely a part of that, but also the fact that you're not really dealing. I mean, the entire Gorgon thing was fake, right? That was that's part of the deal, and so then in the afterword here, it reflects back on the original job where
gets his pony.
You get somebody who's hired to catch this house pony, and that's the story. Okay, so that's the first book.
This is how we get to start out our night.
That's how we're starting out. It's already 8:00. So, what do people think, man? Who all? First of all, did everybody get a chance to read at least the 2 issues?
I skimmed issue 1.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't see it except for the cover. But I'm really not a Deadpool aficionado, so
yeah. I know I read it all, and I really did appreciate it as a pastiche, as a farce of the genre. and it did a really good job of playing with the tropes of spy comics while still being a Deadpool like ambush bug level like yuck fest. And so and actually Isaac points out it's like Looney Tunes and the Daffy Duck versus the artist. They actually mentioned that in the dialogue specifically. So,
Right.
so you are directly on the money. That was in the artist's, the writer's mind in crafting this story.
But yeah, it's like here I was going, I can't believe that this Deadpool story is giving me more of the spy genre, especially the kind I'm looking for, than anything else I've read.
Well, and one story that I had totally spaced off, one storyline, Nick Mueller in the chat points out that Dick Grayson was a spy for a time in the New 52 universe. They killed off Nightwing.
Didn't they butcher it?
Oh, I didn't know how it ended. I've only read like the beginning and the middle of that story arc, which it started really fun. But he basically goes undercover as a spy for a terrorist organization called Spiral. And it was there's something really funny about Deadpool in the Hawaiian shirt. Yeah, definitely. He was pulling some Miami Vice vibes with that one.
Right.
But yeah,
I think once they brought back Jace, they wanted to specifically out him as still being the Bond character and give Deadpool back his identity as Deadpool.
I definitely made it read easier. If you would have been dealing with two Jaces with the fake face,
right.
and everything, that would have been really conflicting.
Oh,
and
it probably would have made it better.
It may
could have been interesting. Yeah,
it would have been interesting. So I know that the sixth issue definitely felt like it was racing toward the conclusion, but I didn't think it did it in a way that disserved the silliness of the story, because it's not like a story that has to have a denouement that works, because it's just so
right.
out of left field with it.
It's a classic Bond spoof. It's just done in a, how do you say it? It's not deliberately a spoof. It's just Deadpool, and Deadpool happens to be spoof material.
Yeah, and so and I also like that they laid out. There were hints in issue 1 about the stuff that's revealed in issue 6, and so I did enjoy that part of it too, where it didn't feel like it's
was
like
really nice, yeah,
where it was like out of nowhere, and that's one thing that with the Pennyworth comic I was telling you about, when the story has its twist in it, you can go back and see where those hints were beginning on, but it still didn't justify the way the twist went for me. There were a couple of things that were just like, not too much, but I enjoyed it. It is definitely not my favorite spy comic. I'll tell you that right now for nothing.
Well, like I said, it certainly was not something I ever expected to come along, but the fact that, like I said, it just did such a good job of showing and spoofing and everything else, the genre as a whole in comics, it had to be my choice for tonight.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's your choice, nobody else's.
And again, especially the fact that it did so while simultaneously bringing in that superhero aspect, that is what I'm basing all of this on. Right. How perfectly appropriate.
Well, from what little I got to read of it, which skim, I did read some of the dialogue. I just didn't have a lot of time to read everything. At least from issue 1, it seems like an enjoyable comic. It seems like it's very spy themed, but it seems, if I'm going to call it like an espionage or spy comic, about as good of a spy story as Master of Disguise is.
Ooh. Oh man, that's harsh. Like Dana Carvey's Master of Disguise?
Yes.
Oh man, that's cold.
Again.
I never read that one, but I did read Scott Beatty's one issue story in, was it Gotham Knights or Gotham? I think it was Batman Gotham Knights with Knights. Something like that. There was one issue that showed Alfred Beagle, not Alfred Pennyworth, Alfred Beagle, infiltrating a spy group during the Cold War, and his identity gets revealed, and they're all after him. And he goes back to his headquarters, and they decide that it's time for him to. He's no longer good for the team because his cover's been blown. They have his face. They know his name, so he has to change his name, go to America, because if they ever catch up to him, his life will not be worth a penny. And that is how Alfred Beagle, and that was originally his name. Alfred Beagle becomes Alfred Pennyworth, working for the Waynes. And I thought that was better than, you don't need a whole series of Pennyworth's background, but yeah.
And I do think that's a really fun thing. Fizz actually brings up, how come Pennyworth can't just be a butler? They even gave Alfred a TV show.
I really like the MI6 aspect.
Well, and here's on the Pennyworth comic, one nitpick that I will share really quick is they make it a point, and they several times mention that he's an agent of MI5, but MI5 is domestic intelligence. MI6 is international intelligence.
Right. So, it's the difference between our FBI and CIA.
Well, actually, more like the NSA and the CIA.
Okay.
Yeah. Because our FBI is their Scotland Yard. So, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah. So that's they kept talking about MI5 and MI5, and I'm like, come on, man. It's not hard to look this up. But anyway,
the annoying thing about both MI5 and MI6 is that we now have Mission Impossible 5 and 6, and they get labeled MI5 and 6.
Well, and there's been a whole bunch of other stuff, but yeah, I back to the thing as far as Alfred goes. It was relayed back in the 70s that Alfred had done some spy stuff and had also been a combat field medic before becoming a butler. So the idea that Alfred could do everything is a long held part of the Bat mythos. It wasn't just created in the recent spate of stuff.
Right. So. Untold Legend of the Batman from the 70s, or
they mentioned in that one too.
Yeah, it shows him. Of course, that would have been like World War II flashback for him, but he's like crawling under wire and using a machine gun on some people, and he's they always have him talking about, I'm just a field medic. I'm not a doctor. I can't patch up some things, but he's good enough to, stitch up Batman when he comes back cut, and that's, so that has a long history, and yet he's also an actor. And so he's so he taught Batman some spy stuff, but he also taught him acting and, disguise and throwing your voice and all that sort of stuff. So, so,
nice.
Which is exactly why Christopher Lee should have played Alfred, and he never did.
Yeah, that would have been amazing.
I don't know. I've always said I'm spoiled after Michael Caine. I can read any comic, and it doesn't matter what he looks like. I'm hearing Michael Caine's voice.
Well, I think that what's her name, Andrea, whoever does the casting for the Batman animated series, Andrea something, she basically, for the most part, she casts people who she would cast for a live action movie. And the person she picked as Alfred, when he was on Babylon 5, I'm like, that's Alfred right there. That guy could be Alfred. I mean, why didn't they cast him?
And then he was.
He was? Well, as the voice, but I'm saying if they'd made a live action one.
Oh, you're saying it looks like him.
Perfect. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, and even Richard Mall, who was the voice of Harvey Dent and Two-Face. He definitely he was just so tall. I don't think he would have looked like Harvey in live action, but he definitely was able to, he had the presence. So
but the guy who played Harvey Bullock, I mean, you've seen him in he was not Terminator. What is that movie with the where he goes to get your ass to Mars? The Schwarzenegger movie.
Total Recall.
Total Recall. He was in Total Recall. He's one of the co-workers with Schwarzenegger at the beginning, and it's like, oh my gosh, he looks just like Harvey Bullock, and he sounds like him because he's basically doing that character. So yeah,
Very
that
interesting.
it's one of the few times I've actually seen him in anything. But it's like he
That'd been
looks
cool
just
if he
like
actually played him. I like
Yeah.
Bullock. He's probably one of my favorite Batman characters.
Yep.
yeah.
So anyway, enough about that. We're going to go ahead and do my comic, which I
Okay.
had
Let's
I said
go.
I was so set on Pennyworth. So we've talked a lot
This
about
is
it.
hilarious too. The vast difference between what you were going to do and what you ended up with.
Yeah. So
We've spent how much time on what you were going to do?
I know. But so the thing is that I have I was racking my brain about what to do, and I didn't want to do this book because I had already covered it as a review on my channel, but nobody else had read it. So I thought I would share it with everybody. Here is Disney's Minnie and Daisy Spy Power. Now, this is the frustrating thing about this. This, as best as I can figure out, was a series that was done by it's an Italian fumetti series, right? But only one issue, as far as I've been able to find, was translated into English. And for a while, Disney's had licensed out a bunch of their American and European comics to this Peachtree Playthings company, and they were selling them for $1 at Walmart and at Dollar Trees and other places like that. So I put down $1.25 for this book.
Well, darn, because I really wanted to know where the rest of this went.
Oh, I know. I've seen articles
learn Italian.
in Italian online talking about the series, but I've never been able to find any of the other books or anything. And like I said, it appears to have only been released in Italy as an original story. But yeah, this was my pick. And I picked it just because I thought, like, what on earth are they going to do with this series? And it is
I love
super
how it
fun.
starts out already, by the way, with the title being something that you have to decode.
Oh, yeah, right here. Use the code to figure it out. Yeah, and the code shows up throughout the thing too. So, but yeah, so the premise is that Minnie Mouse is a student at university, and
which already is an interesting premise. They're recreating the Mickey universe here,
right?
Putting them all in college.
So she's a university, and she happens to run into somebody who's seems to be on life's last leg. There's some sort of issue where he's been attacked, and is given a little barrette thing, and suddenly she starts hearing directives from somebody to go make the delivery of this chip to somewhere. And she's racing through campus, and everything's crazy, and all of a sudden she starts getting chased by a mysterious person. Well, she's got this little earbud and is running along the whole thing. And so the first part of the story is just her running through campus to try to make connections with somebody while she's being chased. And she ends up finding out
this weird disease.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, everyone is being affected by this weird artsy disease.
Right. And she ends up going to her roommate is Daisy Duck, and they're flying off to Paris, right? She's getting this command that she's just blindly trusting whoever is talking in her ear.
Someone in her ear. I don't know if he said that.
So it's this fancy gala, and there's all these people here, and what are they doing at this fancy art gallery? Well, it turns out that one of the art pieces is actually a secret weapon, and everybody at this gallery is some kind of spy.
We also end up with the doppelganger Mickey here. I love that part.
Yeah. So, and the only thing she can do is to try to steal this weapon that's disguised as a sculpture before the other spies do it.
And I love that image. That is such a great,
single
page image there. He's like, make sure nobody else finds out about it. And that's like,
everybody knows, right?
Right. Now there's something really
they all have
cool
detectors. Is that it? They all have like little detectors. And they all suddenly went off at the same time. That's cool.
There's something really cool that happens artistically in this comic. If you scroll down again, you notice how you start getting what are basically blank backgrounds, except they're not blank. They're using pop art, right? And this is appropriate on so many levels. One, the 1960s aesthetic of the classic spy movie.
Mm-hmm.
Two, the fact that they are in an art gallery, right,
Right.
is really interesting. And I love that the ultimate weapon, the ultimate piece of artwork, is thus a dice, just like the fuzzy dice back in the 60s that people used to hang in their cars, right? And then there's the twist that all those red buttons on the die, right? Like I said earlier, it's always the red button, right?
Yep, yep. So it turns out the thing is actually a universal weapon, right?
Yeah.
And this is
Interesting.
the great first rule of spying: a spy doesn't share all their information. The second rule is don't get caught.
Yeah.
Immediately followed by get her.
The weapon is really interesting, perfectly Mickey-esque.
Yes. And so
I just have to say that the premise of this is like, this would be a great movie no matter who the main character was. I mean, this would be a great plot if you made a movie this way of a girl on campus finds the spy who was supposed to be on a mission, and he hands over his two-way communicator with his operative, or the person who's who's operating him, and they're like, grab this, run here, and you never meet them, and suddenly you're off on a mission that this other person was supposed to complete. And it's got you flying to Paris, and it's like, this is a cool premise.
Well, and this trope has been used before. I mean, it was
the
in
unintentional
Condor Man.
spy.
It was in Scarecrow and Mrs. King. That's how the series opens there. Chuck uses the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's
Inner Space, even
The
or the spy that
up in
the spy that the man who knew too much, right?
Yeah.
39 Steps, also another Hitchcock film. So it's a solid genre trope, and so to see this played out with Minnie Mouse in this wild, exuberant, fun, wholesome animal world was just so much fun. So much fun.
That's how Birds of Prey started too.
Oh yeah,
that's Black Canary
Can I
gets
also
sent a
say-
headpiece and she doesn't know who it is. Yeah. That's
Well, here's
right.
the thing. I don't know about you. I have always loved Minnie Mouse because she's just super cute. And anyone who knows her can easily hear her voice in your head immediately, which just makes her more adorable. So reading this was very interesting, right? Hearing her voice the entire time.
Well, I do think there's like a benefit to reading a somewhat like IP story like this, where a lot of the characters do have very distinct voices, and even the made up just for this story, drawn in a random Disney animal character style. Because you've watched so many Disney things, you could start just imagining voices for literally everyone here.
And that's what I really liked about this, was seeing the spy genre translated into the Mickey Mouse universe. If anybody here has seen Netflix's Green Eggs and Ham in their second season, they did the same thing. It was really interesting to see how, the question of like, okay, if Dr. Seuss were to do spies, how would he do it? And this, like that, gives a lot of interesting and clever answers.
Well, so the spoil the story, the ultimate weapon runs out of gas, and then it gets crushed by a steamroller, and Minnie has to go back to home base, a failure. But because the whole idea was to keep it out of enemies' hands, it really wasn't that much of a failure. And then we find out that the mysterious voice in her ear that she didn't recognize, in a trope that only works in comics, is in fact her roommate, Daisy.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
Why? Because of the voice? I mean, a lot of people sound very different over like communication, like phones and stuff, than they do.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it. They have a voice changer or whatever.
She might even have a different like speech pattern when she's like, she might have like her operator speech pattern, and then like she's just very casual when she's talking off of it.
Yep, and they do, and there are hints earlier in this book about this twist. But once again, I thought this was just such a great ending. It's just a great introduction to the premise, and I desperately wanted the rest of the series to be released, and so every couple weeks I was at the Dollar Tree hoping they'd have some more comics and find out what happens in Spy Power #2 and C'est la vie. I have never heard. It was not produced. So there you go. That was mine. And like I said, I can't say it's my favorite spy comic ever, largely because Metal called dibs on mine.
Yeah.
But also this is definitely up there, and I absolutely love one of the things I love about this. I started is that this is a comic that is it is intended and it is written with a girl audience in mind, right? But it doesn't cheap out on the action. It doesn't it's not limited in any kind of way. It's still a spy comic for 7-year-old girls, that it's still a spy comic, right? A lot of times you have these ideas, this trend that's been going on the last 10 years in American comics, where they'll like, oh, we want to do Patsy Walker Hellcat, but for girls, and they rob all of the Hellcatness out of Hellcat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the Patsy Walkerness out of Patsy Walker, and it's just, me and my gay friend going out for coffee, woohoo. I mean, like, if you wanted to just do a slice of life story, that's great, but when you're using pre-existing characters, they already have genre expectations. So if you're reading a Hellcat comic, it needs to be a Hellcat comic, right? But what these guys did, these crazy Italians, they did a Minnie Mouse comic that is a spy comic, and it's both of those things,
right?
And it doesn't have like the violence and the hard edge of some spy stuff, but it has all the fun of the genre. It uses the expectations and tropes of the genre in a way that it's not predictable. In a way, it's subversive in the way that it's not predictable, but it is also comfortable and knowing. And I really enjoyed it for all of those reasons.
Yeah, while also still hitting all the beats that you want from like a Mickey Mouse style story. I think the ending is what really sells it for me, because it is a good spy story, but then that is just like a classic Mickey Mouse style ending to everything. Yes. And I think if you fumbled on that part, everything else also falls apart.
And so, also, side note, why is it that Europe makes the best Mickey Mouse material these days? Like, what's up with
because they're distant and they can look at it like a foreign culture, so they show more respect to it than we do.
There may be something to that.
It's kind of like when you go over and you give like a Marvel property to like a Japanese mangaka, and they make it like an old Marvel character, and like, why can't we do that now? Because they respect it as a foreign culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a question of why does Disney treat Mickey in general like they have for the last 50 years?
Mm-hmm. Well, at least last 30. But anyway, so yeah, that was my pick. So anybody have any final thoughts before we move on to the medals? Because I want to end on Suicide Squad, Hutch.
Just that, like I said, they set up so much that I would have loved to see still play out. Everything from Agent M and the fact that he looks like Mickey and what they would have done with that, would they end up having the two meet or keep Mickey completely oblivious every time? Would they have started trying to do a love triangle? Who knows
or
what they've done.
Is Agent M actually like a mind-controlled Mickey? He doesn't even remember it.
Maybe, right?
Is it like a Rose and Thorn situation where
like he's a sleeper agent. And he just gets like woken up at times, and then he goes back to sleep.
Right? Like, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
So much.
Curse you!
Get the phone call and it's like,
more spy power.
Agent X, it's time to activate.
Yeah, I'm sure Pete eventually would have shown up as like a a Blofeld style character. Right?
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So, anyway, the medal picked Spy Family. Which
I in fact did, yes,
which is one of my, as you know, if you watch the last Spy stream, that I love Spy Family. It's such a fun series. And this really quick on the premise. We'll just go over it because we talked about it quite a little bit last time. In a land that's definitely not 1960s East Germany, there is a spy from definitely not West Germany who has been sent to stop the political rise of the former leader of war-torn East Germany, who is definitely not Adolf Hitler. And in order to stop him, he's got to ingratiate himself to him because they're looking for a peaceful outcome to this conflict between East and West. And so Twilight, the spy, builds himself a fake family and accidentally fake marries an assassin and fake adopts a psychic child. Ta-da! Spy Family. And so these
Oh, people... and also the clairvoyant dog.
Oh yeah. Are we introduced to the clairvoyant dog yet?
No, he's not in this one yet, but that is a big part of the story too. That there's a dog who gets premonitions, who becomes part of their family.
And so it plays on every kind of mid-century trope, and it's got spy stuff.
It's very obvious that it is what happens when Japan tries to do a Western trope.
Right? Well, yeah, there's
but also when it gets paid to make family propaganda too. I think that's actually one of the best parts of this.
That's apparently the theory. Yeah.
Family propaganda.
Well, yeah, and so one of the fun things of the story as a whole, the series as a whole, is you get to see Twilight like really investing genuinely into this family that he feels he may have to abandon, doesn't know, and everybody, all these characters are looking for a place to belong, and when wondering if they're belonging together, and that's one of the great things. So, should stop talking. Metal, you want to go ahead and introduce this particular story that you picked out?
Yeah. So, like I was saying backstage while you were still busy, the chapter I picked is not actually the best like spy chapter. I picked it though because as a total story, this is my favorite spy comic, and this just happens to be my favorite chapter in it. So this current mission number 15 in the manga, if you've watched the show, it's mission 10 in the anime, so you know which one we're already talking about. And it is the dodgeball game that Anya has to play in class. It's just like a normal day, but because her mission, she's assigned herself the mission. Her adopted father's mission is to get her to be closer to either getting enough Stella stars so they can be invited to like the banquet at the end, or the second possible route, getting close to this boy here, Damien, the second son of the guy in charge that they're trying to get in on. She has to just like navigate the world of school, being oddly enough probably 2 years younger than she's lying that she actually is. So she's like this stupid little kid who obviously couldn't know any better, using her psychic powers to navigate school. And they get thrown into a dodgeball game. Now, she knew that the dodgeball game was coming up ahead of time, and she told her family about it, and her adopted mother decides, we're going to train her, which if you know anything about you'll find out later, may or may not be a good idea.
Yeah, I'm sure in the I can't remember, but I'm sure in the anime.
Oh, they exaggerate and add a whole training.
There's probably a whole flashback to show them training.
And, and Yor is a superhuman assassin.
Oh yeah. She can like walk up to a tank and probably split it in half if she kicked it hard enough.
Right.
Yeah. So. But the only reason they're doing this is because Becky here, her friend in school, heard from a friend of a friend that you might get a Stella star for winning the dodgeball match, which is already questionable. You see Twilight's questioning it too. It's like, a friend of a friend, huh? Like, you're going to trust Becky, the girl who gossips all the time? Sure. But they do some training anyway, and the big dodgeball game comes up. So that she sees this as part of her mission. This is a very serious thing. I need to win this star so that my daddy can, succeed in what he's supposed to be doing. And when they get to the big game, it turns out it's a lot more difficult than they thought because they have an early bloomer on the other side in both intellect and size. This huge Goliath of a boy who's apparently only 6 years old.
World's largest 7-year-old.
Yeah, or 7 years old. Yeah. Well, it says age 6. So,
is he 6? Oh, it is.
Yeah,
it
it says Bill Watkins, age 6. So he's the world's largest 6-year-old you've ever seen, who's like just prodigious at everything, and he's the only person the other side even needs on their team. But he's still struggling after knocking out pretty much everyone else on their team. Because there's no way he can know that Anya is psychic and can read every single thing that he's planning to do.
Well, and this scene that's on the thing is great because Bill takes a look at the whole cast of the opposing team, and he just mathematically, like a pool shot, one throw to knock out almost everybody. It's just great.
Pinball.
Yeah.
Bing, 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 bing.
And then Becky's there like, if that hit me, I'd die. It's like, that's okay. I go easy on girls. It's like, that's even worse.
And so then, of course, Damien's got his couple of lackeys, and they have to sacrifice themselves to save Damien for some reason.
For no reason. Just other than
They
they suck
just
up them all
worship
the
the
time.
ground he walks on. That's all.
Yeah, he's important, right? It's like knowing a celebrity. So they're just like, oh no, we have to look good in front of him so he doesn't cast us aside.
Right. Even
though
though
Damien just wants actual friends. That's actually a big point in there. It's like he keeps these guys around, but every time you like read his thoughts, he wants actual friends that want to be around him. It's very lonely being him.
Except no matter what Anya does.
It's very complicated because clearly he likes her.
Yes.
He's got like that kind of tough guy, tsundere type aspect between the two of them.
And one of the fun things about Anya's character is like Anya grew up as an orphan. She has no idea about her past, and no one wanted her because like she tries too hard to impress people, and so she'll read people's thoughts, and then because she's like 4.5 or whatever, she misinterprets.
Really weird.
She just comes off as really weird, right? And so everyone's like, "Man, you're really weird and intense, girl. That's maybe you should stand over there with the weird, intense people." Oh, and I love that part of the thing. But anyway, so she's using her. So this scene is great because you've got Bill, who's just like a beast, but he plans out all of his moves ahead of time, and so Anya can read his thoughts and dodge out of the way perfectly.
Yeah, and that is just like him being this prodigy in almost all regards, is that he is a thinker. If he was just like some meathead running off of instinct kind of guy, he probably would have just taken Anya out right away. But because he is thinking everything out before he does it, she just knows exactly what he's going to do.
Yep.
And dodges everything.
So she could just jump right out the way.
There is a problem. While she does have the power, Anya is pretty much useless in every regard that doesn't involve reading minds, because she is just an uncoordinated little girl, and she ends up tripping and falling on the ground, and she does not have the athleticism to get up in time before anything would happen to her. So in a twist that absolutely nobody could see coming, unless you actually have been reading this story and know that Damien does like her, he sacrifices himself so she doesn't get hit, hoping that she'll be able to take him out since she hasn't been getting hit up to this point.
Well, and like he's obviously trying to catch the ball too.
Yes,
that's the thing about it. Is like it's not purely sacrificial. He does have a strategy.
He's got a plan.
Yeah. I was gonna say that image up top makes it look almost like he's a Dragon Ball Z character winding up a Kamehameha blast.
Oh, I'm sure that was intentional.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's definitely lots of nods to other properties in it. So, and see, this is the funny thing too is that Damien also is laboring under the apprehension that there's some sort of extra prize for the winners.
Yes.
And so this is obviously, I mean, Becky's heard it from someone, but so has Damien. So, and this is
it gets around.
The future is in my hands now.
And I love Anya's attitude. She's so like self-important. She's like, I'm the one that has to do everything. I've got this special power. I'm the crux. I need to get close to the kid. I need to win all these Stellas. They're on me. And we do get this brief little flashback. This is like the full amount of what I think was a whole 5-minute training sequence in the anime, but it's just like this little barely half a page right here. Where it flashes back to you're teaching her to use her whole body in the throw, and Anya is getting ready to do it. And to some degree, the training was effective.
This is great.
But
I gotta say this line about Anya's seriousness or hyperbolic seriousness. I can't let Scion Boy, which is that's
the second son,
say son, I can't let Scion Boy die in vain. I'm not dead. Damien, I will avenge you.
I'm reminded of that meme of it's like, quit telling everybody I'm dead. Sometimes I still hear his voice.
And so here's the great thing: I have to use all my momentum. I got to take the force of my stomp and the motion of my hips and fill up my hands with, well, whatever.
Yeah. So to some degree, yours training was effective, but then we have to remember that it's being funneled into a small, potentially 4-year-old girl who has no coordination whatsoever and only had like a couple hours of training before this. So
she throws
it just goes straight up. It's got all the power behind it. It just goes down and then straight up and then bounces into his hands. And boink, it's over.
It's over. That's a game. So everyone, of course, is shooting and hollering. Oh, Bill's going to get a Stella Star. And the very proper teacher character says, we don't give stars for daily PE activities. That's nonsense. Who gave you that idea?
Everybody's depressed in the background, like, oh.
This is very...
There's 6-year-olds. Like, you expect these type of rumors and stuff to put around. I think that adds to the realism of an otherwise unrealistic story.
Yeah.
Well, this is very common for this comic and the anime is that, they'll build something up so high and at the very last second it just kind of just poofs into nothingness.
Yeah.
It's like, oops, well, I guess we learned, it's like, what was it? The real what is it they say? The real prize was the friends we made along the way, right?
Yep.
The real prize is almost here, right? Which also ends up getting subverted. The way to get Stellas, and they've pointed this out several times, is basically to actually get this guy's approval because he's running everything. He's like the dean. So like if you were really elegant and you kind of impressed him, he could award them at any time. And he's like, oh, the people who actually would deserve it would be these kids until they start yelling at each other. It's like, well, then maybe not.
The odd thing about this one is that dodgeball does not seem elegant to me.
Oh, dodgeball is very elegant if you're actually dodging the ball.
If you're really good at it. Well, and also at the beginning of the story, they mentioned that this is not normally what this teacher does, but the gym teacher is out sick, and so the I can't remember what class he teaches. I think history. He's subbing.
Yeah, he does. I think it's specifically the history of their country is what he teaches, but he's also like the admissions dean of the school on top of that too.
You were saying something?
Question? Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You keep saying 4-year-old. Is she really 4 years old?
She's lying about her age. We don't know what her actual age is, but she is assumed to be younger than the 6 that she claims to be.
Okay, because 4-year-olds don't play dodgeball. 10-year-olds play dodgeball. I mean,
all of these people are 6 except for her, and she's 1 or 2 years younger than them.
Okay. I don't remember playing dodgeball even at I mean, that's kindergarten. 5-year-old is kindergarten, and 6 is this would be like preschool, and yet it's more like
a 70s universe, right? Could it be that kids were just a little tougher back then?
Well, I remember playing dodgeball.
I'm from the 70s. 70s is when I was 5 years old.
Well, this is also right. This is all an exaggerated, hyperbolic situation, right? But they're also at like this prestigious private school, so everybody here is considered advanced, and you're doing everything earlier than you would have done otherwise. Like their math classes, even
Okay.
though they're supposed to be 6, they're doing things that you're expecting like 5th graders to do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although physically you're not. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
have muscles to
No,
do.
no, you don't. But
Yeah.
that's why Bill is stomping everyone. Like if this was like a normal class, these balls would be flying like they were just barely tossed at each other.
Yeah.
Right? They'd be
I didn't know
lobbed.
how to throw it.
But like Bill has the body of a middle schooler already, and he's just like nailing everyone.
Right.
So, but yeah, and that's
Body of a 40-year-old. Look at that.
yeah, he's a beast. So, but yeah, and she lied about her age, and when the first story we're introduced to her in, which I think is mission 2, maybe, she is obviously lying about her age, but because she was just found, there are no birth records for her, and so they're like, the youngest you can be to get into this school is 6, and Twilight's like, how old are you? And she starts to answer, and then he says, I'm looking for a 6-year-old. And she says, oh, of course I'm 6.
Yeah,
Or
he's thinking in his
thinks in
head.
mind.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's the thing is she's easily able to get by in certain regards because of her telepathy, right? So if she finds out she needs to be something, she can lie and say it. She gets barely passable grades because she is like taking the answers from other kids who are answering it right, and sometimes she picks the wrong person. Like, you know, depending on the subject, maybe Becky's not the best person to steal the answers from.
and that's a whole plot point in the story right after this, actually. But yeah. So, like I said, I absolutely love Spy Family. But I think there are better spy stories. Metal, I think.
Oh, there are tons of them. Sure.
Well, okay, so
This was just my favorite chapter in this entire story. So I was going to, whatever, I'm bringing my favorite.
I was going to ask that, Rhys, since this would have been your favorite as well. If you were to choose a chapter, what would you have chosen?
I can't. It's actually several of the mission chapters. There is, there is one where they're on a cruise ship, and it takes like
that's
a volume and a half.
Yeah.
And it's actually really fun because all 3 of the main characters are doing a different like part of the mission, and they all intersect in ways no one's paying attention to. So
yeah, there's a certain part in there. I think it's the 3rd through 5th chapters of that arc that if I didn't pick this and I was actually going to go with something that's more like legit spy, I would have picked those 3 chapters. That would just be a really good example of all of the actual espionage going on.
Yep. And the other one that I would have to go with, it's also an Anya chapter. The kids are on a field trip, and some terrorists take the bus hostage, and Anya is there, and her dad can't get to her, and her mom can't get to her, and they're both freaked out because this is going on, but neither of them can like show themselves and save the day because it'll imperil their own individual missions. And so Anya is left to her own devices, and she's, what does that even mean? And so she ends up, it ends up being it's a great story. It is a great story, but it also sets up a lot of the personal drama, and that is in volume, I want to say 12 or 13. But anyway, yeah, and those ones are more like, this is a really this series has a lot of these fun little mini stories that intersperse between like the more heavy drama stories. And
yeah, that's the Red Circus arc. That is mission 69 through like 72 or 3, which would put it easily in volume 11.
Yep, there you go.
Oh, wow.
So now I know I reread it. Of course, I'd read it before. Cartoonicus, did you take it? Were you able to get a chance to read the story?
I did, yeah.
What'd you think?
Well, I can't believe I had forgotten that I had seen the episode.
Okay.
I totally forgot, spaced my mind entirely. Well, as I was busting Metal's chops before the show, I was pointing out that you chose a issue with absolutely no official spying stuff going on whatsoever.
Yeah.
He of course was quick to remind me that the whole time they're technically spying. They're just
All of this is in service of the mission.
But of
Or
course,
they
that's
believe it
always
is.
that. If you remember from before,
Yeah.
has been my complaint with Spy Family, is that there just isn't enough actual, obvious spying stuff that goes on. When the whole time I feel like Twilight could totally be doing whatever it takes to help her cheat through, school and
There's some
having.
times where he does.
Yeah.
I've only seen it
Yeah.
once so far.
Like the time where he goes and tries to like change the exam results.
Yeah, I was like, how did we take like 12 episodes before I got to this? And then, of course, you pointed out how like it's different when it's a manga, because for me, what'll be episode 12 is like halfway through a book, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's 5 episode or chapter differences between what this is in the manga and what it is in the
Right.
show.
So yeah,
And
it's
sometimes they'll pick a single chapter like this, and instead of like compressing them in multiple ones into an episode, they'll be like, no, we're going to flush this one out into a whole episode itself, add more
Right.
stuff to it. Same thing with that like single page or whatever. That's like the Anya's getaway to the castle, and they just make a whole episode out of that
right.
one.
So, Hutch, did you get a chance to read this one?
Nope. Sorry.
No, that's no problem. It's no problem. Just we all have real lives, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So the last one, and I have, oh my goodness, I should have been getting that one ready.
I do want to say this. I'm surprised at just how accurate to the book the artwork is in the anime.
Yeah.
I
It's
absolutely I love the art in Spy Family. It's so evocative.
I think
And
that's
they do-
something that's just becoming more standard though over time.
Well-
Like you could go far enough back, and you'd start having more like house styles for animation companies where they kind of try to incorporate the manga style, but it would still end up looking a lot like the animation company. But ever since like the late aughts or whatever, it's been slowly rolling into where they're just trying to replicate the manga style as best as they can in animation.
Well, do you think that a lot of manga writers end up coming from having had a job in animation, and then they go off to do their own thing and they bring that style with them?
No, I don't think that's the case.
No? Okay.
So now, Hutch has been
Alrighty.
sitting here
Hey,
patiently
Jelly.
waiting for us to talk about our book
Okay.
because
Yeah, I did toy with 2 other books. In fact, the first ones that came to mind were Danger Trail, which was DC's reinvention of King Faraday as a spy. There you go. And I reread it, anticipating that that's the one that I would do. And in rereading it, I'm like, it's so cliched that they actually get on the Orient Express and he gets up on top of it. And it's like the entire book is basically every spy cliche that they could think of. Like they
That sounds
intended
great.
to put it in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's
And-
what Agent Deadpool was, but that was done in jest, right?
Right. And this is done seriously. And it's just, I mean, at one point, King Faraday is thrown from a helicopter that's way high up, and he plunges down and he grabs onto, this is in Paris, he grabs a hot air balloon and slides down the balloon into the basket underneath, and where 2 people are drinking champagne, and he grabs one of the glasses of champagne and says, "Oh, just set me down over there. Thank you." It's like a parody of Bond. It's a parody of every, it's not parody. It's just, we're making him James
In
Bond.
other
and
words, it's
here's
the
everything he's
MCU.
ever- Yeah. What's that?
I said, in other words, it's the modern MCU.
Yeah, I suppose it's just, and then I thought about doing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which the title is what James Bond is called in other countries, Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And this was
I didn't
a
know that.
cross-gen book, which was, it's a parody of James Bond in that they really do recast Bond from time to time, and so the guy who is the main character, like, this is the latest guy to play this agent, to be this agent. Whoever is the new guy is always called that name. So it's sort of what people have said is the explanation for why James Bond never ages and why he, there's a new guy playing James Bond. They've said, hey, is it the canon that maybe, there's a new guy and he's now James Bond, and then there's a new guy and he's James Bond? But really, James Bond is a guy with dead parents, who, he's got a backstory. He's not just a vague nothing, and it's a really beautiful book, and I did like it. It's the problem is the reason I didn't. I would have done that one, except that it's an incomplete story. They ended on issue 5 because CrossGen folded before number 6 could come out. So
wait a second.
Question: how close is the movie to the actual source material?
I didn't know there was a movie.
It is not based on
There's
the
a
comic.
Kiss Bang Bang movie.
Yes,
Oh,
Kiss
it's
Bang
not?
Bang
Okay.
movie
So
is not based on this. Yeah.
I never knew if it was or not, because I liked the movie. I was like, well, if it was anything like that, I'd read it. But
What about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang?
I don't think there's any
Chitty
relation
Chitty
there.
Bang Bang.
Although Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was written by Ian Fleming, so
No way!
yes.
Yes, way.
True.
Oh my gosh!
You were today
You're
years
just
old.
learning that now?
I certainly was. Wow. Hold on, that's
okay.
an old movie. That
It's
means
got all the signatures in it. I mean, if you're paying attention.
crazy.
All right. So what I chose, it's like I wanted actual espionage, not parody of spy, but it's if you've ever seen the movie Triple X, the first Triple X movie with Vin Diesel, it opens with a guy who is obviously meant to be James Bond in a tux, and he's trying to infiltrate a Rammstein concert in Germany, and he goes in there wearing a tux, and it's just making fun of how real spy work is not like James Bond,
Right.
where you get to dress up in a tux and go to the Riviera and hang out at a casino and bet $1 million, and
Yeah.
most likely you're going to be hanging out with some really grungy people, and you're not going to be wearing nice clothes,
Yeah.
and so I didn't want a
Or
parody.
pretending to be the guy's gardener for 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Gosh, I wish we could talk about Super Spy.
So what I picked was Suicide Squad, which really is espionage. At least in the first 10, 20 issues, it is very much an espionage comic. And to the point that more and more they didn't wear their supervillain costumes when they went into action. They wore real clothes. And the first issue, what works is that these are characters who really are not big showy supervillains. They're like, okay, there's one guy who throws boomerangs. There's one guy who's a good shot with a gun. There's somebody who's really good at martial arts. There's one character who can turn into a magical witch when she says enchantress, but the character is hard to control, and so she changes back to her regular identity. That's the only far-fetched thing really in here. And it begins, I even love the way the credits are written out like they're rolling in a movie. Like it's opening in in an airport, and these characters go in and set up. They're like obviously prepping for an attack. This
It threw me off at first because at first I thought they were naming the characters, and then it would be like, oh, writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Ostrander came from. He was a screenwriter before doing comics, wasn't he?
Was he? I don't know that. I
maybe.
can't say I know that about him.
I actually really like the way the credits were done here.
Yeah. And what you're seeing is it opens kind of like a James Bond movie where there's a thing unrelated. I mean, we came here for Suicide Squad, and the first thing that happens is a big action-packed attack on an airport where the Air Force One is outside, and there's a mayor and a governor ready to meet him. And then all of a sudden, these portals open up, and all these supervillains are dumped out. There's one who's like a lion man. There's a guy who throws javelins at super speed, and they just start killing people right and left. It's really brutal. and they tell Air Force
Especially
One.
for a code comic.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, there's people are killed in panel, not off panel. So yeah, it is definitely pushing what is allowed under the code, and it's really about as brutal as I like comics to get. I don't want to see a lot more gore than this, but yes, this is probably, actually I am kind of surprised it got past the Comics Code Authority. Given that it used to be that like war comics couldn't show a dead body, they clearly have loosened the comics code by this time. So yeah, this guy is like, he's knifing people and slicing necks, and they tell Air Force One to take off, and the portal opens up again, and this guy pulls out a flaming sword, cuts off the landing gear as it's taking off, and destroys Air Force One.
Can I point out something? This is weird. I did not notice this the first time.
What's
if we
that?
go back a few pages, there's a
sorry.
shot of Air Force One when it's first landing.
Mm-hmm.
Go on, see if you can find it. It's like on this first or second page.
That was at the bottom of that
Okay,
page.
so yeah, look at this plane here.
Mm-hmm.
Look what kind of plane it is. And I was wondering, it's like, why does it have the Japanese symbol on it? I would find out later. But go back now to that other page. That is not at all the same plane. Did they switch up the artists here?
Well, that's a good catch. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's so weird.
I also noticed that the plane, when it's taking off, it says "wine," which, this is something I had not realized. The first big job that Ostrander had for DC was plotting Legends that was written by Len Wein. So,
yeah, and
No, I thought the plane was just a day drinker.
it's spelled wrong, man.
Yeah, so they actually bring down Air Force One, and then this team departs in under a minute, having done all this damage. And then some people walk in and say, "Okay, time, that was 1 minute." And there's all these people lying around dead. And it turns out that the country of Karak is training these terrorists, and this was a live demo for which they have made.
Were they training them? I thought that they were being sold to them by someone else.
Right. They're saying here, this was a live demonstration of what our guys can do.
They had previously been training them.
Yes.
Yeah. But
it's a third party who's been doing that, is it not? I thought just the country of Karak was just buying them.
Well, I think they're
Karak is the one training them, and they're selling it to somebody else because the intent is for them to be going to America.
Karak is the one selling them.
Right.
I thought they were the ones buying.
No, President Marlowe of Karak is the one who is saying, these guys can be sent anywhere you want. It's going to be America, right?
Misunderstood.
So, right. The if you keep going, so that is that up at the top. It's like, so these are going. It's going to be America, right? That's where we're going to attack. And so this was just basically a bunch of undesirables who had been rounded up and told to be there to just, portray themselves as tourists. And then there were some American
actors. They had no idea what was going on.
Like the guys who are playing the governor and the mayor are actually actors who, like American actors who were hired, and they're like, well, they're, actors are such cheap. So
I think some of them were prisoners and stuff.
Right.
It's
political dissidents and prisoners and artists that they don't, artists and writers, they don't care about.
Yeah, the line is great. It says, let me see if I can't read it here.
Yeah, you'd have to zoom in a bit, but yeah.
Though somebody was hired and told to land a plane while pretending to be Air Force One.
Yeah,
that must have been the weirdest conversation. Here's what I want you to do.
Yeah, and that's probably why it's not an actual Air Force One plane, which would be even bigger than that kind.
Well, right, and that's why I said, when I realized, that's why it had a Japanese symbol on it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So here's the line. Most of these people were riffraff from our prisons, criminals, dissidents, intellectuals, artists. You know the sort. expendable. The rest are actors
Right.
hired abroad for a movie, as they say, actors are such cattle.
Yeah.
Artists, thanks a lot.
So, and also little side note there, I did look it on Ostrander. He
Mhm.
was not a screenwriter before starting to do comics. He was actually an actor. He was
Oh, okay.
in
Okay, that's
the
funny.
theater. So
But he came from a theater background. That
came
makes
from a
sense.
theater background. Yeah.
Sure. And then we open with the actual spy work, and the rest of issue 1 is basically introducing the characters who will be in here, which I also kind of covered already. You know who Deadshot is, what the you can see, by the way, this guy Economos. Oh no, go back. The Warden Economos. That's the character that they actually put on screen in the second Suicide Squad movie, and they pretty much matched the way this guy looks. It's very good considering, you know, usually they don't try to make a person look like the comic book character at all. That's like that is that guy.
Which one are you talking about?
The one right up
The-
at the top in the very top. You
in
can
the
go a
teal
panel,
shirt.
go a page earlier. You can
With
get
the
a better-
glasses? The guy who
Yeah.
was lying to the lady?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's lying to Vicky Vale. Yeah, so
Oh, that's Vicky. Yeah.
that's
Yep.
Vicky Vale. Yeah, and they're just explaining that this is just a prison to hold all of these villains, and that is the basis of the story, is that from this prison that holds supervillains, they have their pick to just grab this one and take them on a mission.
No, wait.
They slap a explosive bracelet on their wrists.
Are you
and
saying
say-
that this comic invented Bell Rev?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
So
Interesting
Belle
history
Rev
there.
Prison in Louisiana is the location where they're putting all these villains. And then actually Amanda Waller works for the government. And the idea is that she sends these characters out on spy missions. There are a few people who are good characters, like Colonel Flag there, and
Bronze Tiger.
Bronze Tiger was a assassin, but he was mentally manipulated. He is actually a good person. So he is the backup, although it is later revealed that he was supposed to be leading the team. Amanda Waller could not get Sarge Steele to go for having a black person in charge. Again, more slander on Sarge Steele, you know, as a, I know we like Sarge Steele here. So,
Well, wouldn't it make more sense for Amanda Waller to not be able to convince a League of Assassins assassin
Yeah.
to lead the team? Wouldn't that just
Yeah.
make more sense?
You've got to understand that that's her saying it. It may be her own bias in saying that that's why he didn't want, you know, that
Yep.
he didn't want this guy who's a League of Assassins. And by the way, that story is all about showing that he does still have League of Assassins training going on in his head. So, you know, this is Amanda Waller's own bias showing. She's
so
not
one
an
of-
unbiased person.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to, before we get on the story, one thing I want to talk
Sure.
about is Waller's personality in here,
Mhm.
and how, like how much I appreciate like Ostrander's definition of Waller, especially in relation to how she's portrayed in other media.
Yes.
Where like there is a she's very business oriented, very goal oriented, but she's not without like reason and not
Mhm.
without compassion. It's just
And
that
I
those
will
things
touch
have to
on
take-
that later.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Interesting.
yeah, I want to make very clear that first of all, John Ostrander is really the only one who can write her very well. I've touched on that in previous episodes,
Mm.
and
Did
really,
she exist before this?
No.
she
Well, maybe
well
in Legends.
for Legends, she was created in Secret Origins like 13, I think, which was whatever issue it was, where they first explained where the Suicide Squad came from. They gave the old origin of the old Suicide Squad and Colonel Flag, and then it's basically it sets up this series, the Secret Origins issue.
Yeah, there's
And
an
it
editor's
also
note that points you
reveals-
back to it.
It reveals that she had she lived in Cabrini Green, Chicago, and her oldest son was killed on the streets for like his shoes or something like that. Her oldest daughter was raped and killed, and then or maybe just raped, but then her husband went to confront the guy who did it and he got killed. And she just went on a rage and said, "I'm not losing any more, of my family. You're not taking any more." And she went and put herself through college, put her kids, got her kids out of the house and into college, and she turned her life around, and she has a poli-sci degree, and she goes to work for a politician, and basically helps him get elected, even though he's like a third party guy. And so she takes this to Ronald Reagan and Sarge Steele, and she says, "Look, how about we create Task Force X, and we just take these people that it costs us so much to house them. A lot of these villains, we have to come up with special ways to contain their powers.
Right.
Let's take them out on missions where they could help our country, which is spending money to contain them.
Right.
And if they get killed, the
Nobody
point
cares.
is not to kill them, but if they get killed, you can say, oh, these are criminals. What were they doing loose? It's got deniability and secrecy, and they have explosive bracelets. And this is important. The bracelets are on their wrists. And in issue 10, we see Captain Boomerang there. He's talking with one of the villain of the month is Slipknot, a guy who chokes people. He assembles nooses really quick and can choke people. Unfortunately, they're fighting the Manhunters, who are robots, which is useless. And so he had been talking with Captain Boomerang. He says, are these things really going to go off? And Captain Boomerang says, Flag and Bronze Tiger, they are way too soft and too nice to actually pull the trigger on this thing. Supposedly, if we run a certain distance away from them, it'll go off. I don't think so. If this goes bad, I am out of here. And Slipknot says, good. And then when he finds that he cannot use rope against Manhunters at all, he just starts running. And then you hear a boom. He looks down at his wrist, and it's like, well, the light's going off. But Boomerang did say it was fake. He keeps running. His hand explodes. Slipknot, the guy whose power is to tie knots, loses a hand. And that's the only thing. The only way he's useful is tying knots. So I love that story. They actually took that scenario and put it in the first movie, and they completely botched it up.
Oh,
What a waste. I've said this before, but what a waste of Adam Beach. Come on.
Is that who played Slipknot?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he's
did
an
they
actor.
like do it in the first 5 minutes?
Yeah, he's Adam Beach is a remarkable actor, and yeah,
we could do an entire episode on how the Suicide Squad was done badly twice and on screen.
Or more time.
Second one was way better and still kind of bad, but but the first one, that Adam Beach thing where he shows up as Slipknot, I mean, they didn't even have him with the team. They just suddenly open the car door and he comes out and by the way, this is Slipknot. He immediately runs away, and they blow it up. They blow up his head. It's not his wrist, it's his head. Because they have bombs inside their head. And that's not in their neck. Yeah, there's like a bomb at the back of their head. That's not a visual. Having explosive wrist bracelet is a visual reminder that some of these people are basically enslaved to Amanda Waller to do this. Although these are not good people, but it's the only way that the heroes can make sure that they don't just rebel and kill them and make a break for it. Right. But it is also,
the thing is, back then, again, what year is this comic? 70s, 80s?
86, 87.
Yeah. Okay, it's later than I'm thinking, but
87.
Excuse me, sorry. Okay. I figure the deal is, back then, it's more that they need, a way to keep them from simply running away once they're in the field. So the idea is, if you get too far away from him, there's some signal between him and the thing, it'll automatically go off. Nowadays, we have so much in the way of wireless capability that Amanda Waller can just be sitting in her office watching every single one of them and push that button anytime she wants. So the threat of blowing up your head and killing you entirely is a whole lot more of an incentive to do every single thing she says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
but it's
as
less
a,
incentive for the audience though, because we don't see
Mhm.
right,
it at all times, right? Like if you forgot that it was implanted because it was mentioned at the beginning of the movie,
Mhm.
versus the fact that that wristband is always there, constantly reminding the audience itself of the
right.
threat.
Well, so
And
that's
one of the other
probably
things
why they
about it,
had to sacrifice somebody right in the very beginning to remind us this
well,
is business.
When the
yeah, well,
Suicide
I think
Squad
that's
was in
actually was really cheap.
Superboy, in
Um,
Superboy
It is.
comics,
I'm
they
just
actually
saying
changed
that's
it to
why.
an explosive wrist collar, like a explosive necklace.
So it's
Yeah.
So
visual, right?
it's a visual, and yes,
well,
you could
and I think
do
the other thing about,
subdermal bombs, but you
I
need a
think the other
visual
thing,
reminder. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I'm going to say the other thing about it too is the one of the things I appreciate about the bracelet or even the necklace and flag or bronze tiger having the switch is because it reinforces. I mean, like the um typical um 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 uh I forget what it's called. The system, the typical instructions for combat regiments are that the it's to the lowest um level of authority possible, right? So the person that's on the ground on site
Hmm.
has whoever's in charge of the battalion who's on site has the command of the mission. And so the idea that Waller could watch everything from a drone or something um, doesn't really match up with SOP, standard operating procedure,
Yeah.
for this kind of thing. And so it actually giving Flag and his own doubts and his own questions of his past, or Tiger and his own questioning of his own motivations, giving them this sort of control, um, it actually makes the situation intimate for the reader, because they can see it through the eyes on the ground, as opposed to because that's the other thing we see with Waller in the films, is that she has no attachment to anything going on.
Right.
Um,
And
and
like I
so
said, I'm going to be getting to that
yeah,
in a
yeah.
in a moment. Um, so this is all set up, and then issue 2. I think we could just skip from here to issue 2. Issue
Okay.
2 is the actual undercover thing, and this is why I say it's a great espionage book, because it's all about planning your mission ahead of time. We have goals. And Flag is, he says, go in here and disable this guy. He says, you want me to kill him? Just say I'm, Deadshot's like, you want me to kill him? Say kill him. I'm not a baby. You can tell me I can kill him. He's like, I just said take care of him. You can disable him. You can kill him. Whatever.
Neutralize
And
them.
yeah, neutralize him. There you go.
Well,
That was the word he used. And
right.
it
And
turns out
one of
what?
the well, I'm sorry. One of the things I want to also emphasize too is that the Chimera, the person who's making the portals in the first issue,
Mhm.
is in fact Nightshade,
I was just
who
about to
is
say that. I don't know why you're
oh,
interrupting me to cover what I'm about to
I'm
say.
sorry, I thought you were getting ahead of me, getting ahead of it.
Oh,
You just
I'm
got to her.
I'm
Well,
just about to say Nightshade is the Chimera, the one who was opening the portals, and they made her an accessory to this mass murder that killed like 300 to 500 people. And so she is just outraged, and this book, even in this issue, deals with the complexities of being a spy. There's a moment where she and Flag get to talk about this, and he's had to betray people too. And and he says that the fact that she's infiltrated the jihad to the point that she kind of feels guilty about the fact they're being taken down. He's like, I wouldn't trust you if you didn't feel like you were backstabbing them,
right.
because it shows she's human. But she deploys all these guys to different parts where Deadshot has to take on that guy. What's his name? I
Manticore.
cannot remember. What's that?
Manticore.
Manticore. Yeah, there you go. And unfortunately, the Plastique decides to betray them. She goes to one of the people and says, "You actually have some spies here, and you can get them. They thought that I'm a bad guy. I'm not. I'm a revolutionary." She's actually a French Quebec terrorist. So, unfortunately, the person she talks to is the other undercover operative who is Nemesis, a character that had been killed off in Brave and the Bold several years earlier. And it's revealed that he is alive and well, and he has the master of disguise. You just press this button, his face mask disappears, and his wig, apparently. So he's a great character, and he is one of the other hearts of the team, the good person who is along to kind of ride herd on these villains. And good thing he did, because it would have all been, it would have all been destroyed by Plastique. So then the distractions start, and Mindboggler, who is like the only other superpowered character, she can create visions that everybody can see, and she's the distraction to try to keep all these people, keep them from going and taking down the rest of the team.
You did forget to show how she used that power against Captain Boomerang earlier.
She did use it on Captain Boomerang. Oh yeah, that
in the first issue.
In the first issue, she just used it on him to have the Flash and Superman and Batman big mocking images of them going, ha ha ha, you're a joke. And so they're not friends, Mindboggler and and Captain
He was
Boomerang.
being a jerk, and she took her anger out on him.
Yeah,
he was all embarrassed.
Yeah, and then there's a very long fight scene between this duo, Bronze Tiger and is it Rustem? I can't remember which one. Yeah, and it goes on for quite a bit. For whatever deficits Luke McDonnell has as an artist at the time, and I think he's still a new artist around this time. He'd started on Justice League, and then he came to this book, and he can really do fight scenes well. He may not get a plane exactly right, but he can do fight scenes really well. And then you can see these go on for a while. And then the super speedster is who Captain Boomerang takes on, because he's kind of like a 3-second Flash. And he easily is dispatched, and Boomerang shoves him off and says, "So can you save yourself like Flash would have, create updrafts?" And he goes, splat. And he says, "Nope." And you begin to see how heartless he is. And
this was actually my favorite part of the comic right there.
His character is one of the highlights of the series. So
particularly both this guy and Manticore were the ones who did most of the killing. So seeing them go down hard was very satisfying.
True. Yeah, and he takes down Manticore to the face with his gun.
In the face.
Yeah, it's like, not armored there. That was a bad choice. Yeah, and the problem with June Moon, the Enchantress, is that she really has no control over this alternate identity, and they kind of have to keep threatening her to get her to change back. Yeah, she's basically Magic Hulk. Yeah. And then we see, this is the scene everybody remembers. Captain Boomerang sees that this person's coming up with a machine gun. He could actually just easily throw a boomerang. He's like, well, what do I care about Mindboggler? And he lets her get shot in the back, and he runs away. And this is not going to be a superhero team, obviously. So you're going to be constantly reminded that these are really bad people.
Well, and the line he says, right? Oh, it's such a senseless waste of human life.
It's so weird.
Yep. That's a Monty Python quote.
Yep.
That's a Monty Python quote. And so anyway, they get away, and it's a good first mission, and it's a good example of the kind of missions that they go on. So these are more spy missions than anything else, but like all spy missions, they go off the blocks halfway through. Something goes wrong, and they have to do a lot of fighting to get out of it. I was originally going to do issues 5, 6, and 7, which is where they actually infiltrate Moscow. They go into Moscow to rescue a woman named the Firebird, who is like a dissident writer, and this is more of a political mission. They're going to free her and bring her to America. and they have it all planned out. And in the first issue, they manage to get in to the hotel where she is being kept, and she's like, I don't want to go. What are you talking about? If I had to go, then I would just be free. I'd be in here. I am a constant reminder of the problems of communism. If you just take me away, then everybody will forget me. And they're like, did anybody check to see if she actually wants to go? And the whole mission is once again gone awry, and they have to get out, and it takes 2 more issues for them to escape Russia. They go up against the People's Heroes, and at one point they get into a hotel and they grab everybody's IDs and clothing so that they can pretend to be tourists and get out that way. And they're like, what do we do about the actual tourists? And Deadshot's like, I'll take care of it. And he starts heading in. They actually have to hit him and knock him out. Otherwise, he's just going to kill everybody. This would be the easy way to make sure that they don't talk for the next 36 hours. And instead, Nemesis stays behind to keep them quiet. And so this is, this is why you need good people on the team along with the criminals. And it's a good story, but the issue after that, the reason I mention this is that because we talk about Amanda Waller, and they actually show the scene where she goes to talk to Tolliver, who is their NSA contact, and she says, did you actually check to see if she wanted to leave? Because the Firebird actually ends up getting killed on the way out. So it's just a complete wreck of a mission. And this is mid-mission. So this is like it's what was called the Secret Files, where one character is like summing up all the characters on the team. They would do this from time to time. And so this is sort of a flashback to what happens at that same time. Amanda Waller goes to confront him, and he's like, oh, that's okay. They are supposed to be disposable, right? And she's like, I'd better get them all out of there. And he's like, the whole point of this team, which you set up this way, was that we can disavow them, and it's okay if they all die. And she cracks him across the face and makes a bunch of threats about what'll happen. She says, they're not, these people are not disposable. They are not intended to be that way. They're not just some cheap cannon fodder. And so it's a good scene. It gets you to the heart of what Waller is, that unlike the way she is portrayed in the 2 movies where she's blowing up people willy-nilly, in the second one, she's actually like telling one of the guys to get back there and be killed because everybody's being eliminated. And the whole idea that she would send 2 teams, one of which is just to be a big show as they all get killed, is not in keeping with the way Amanda Waller runs the Suicide Squad.
I would agree, and that's like the idea that like there's a distraction team. Yeah, that's fine, but you still want exfil in that whole thing. And the way the scene you're talking about in 10, there is even echoes of that in the first issue, which is something that I wanted to take the time to highlight. They're doing a psych profile on everybody, and they have this Bell Reef shrink, and he says at this point they are all bruised personalities, including Flag. Some of them should be institutionalized, and they can probably do what you want, but I'm concerned as to what it'll do to them. And Waller says that doesn't bother me much, and the professor says, or the psychiatrist says, it bothers me. To you, they are agents, expendable ones at that. But to me, they're patients, and I resent your cavalier attitude. And her response is, I know, Simon, that's why I hired you, and I respect your viewpoint. So the very idea that like she's aware of the risks, and for the sake of the mission, maybe the risks are worth it, but she's not she's seeming cavalier because she has a hard personality, but she's not actually being cavalier. A truly cavalier person doesn't surround themselves with naysayers and opposing viewpoints, right? And so the very fact that like I as Amanda Waller hired this person who's going to disagree with me, that's an intentionally aware and thoughtful perspective. And when I came across this exchange, I was just like, man, that there is so much like complexity and thoroughness in the character development that's being shown in this brief exchange that I thought was just really telling.
And the artwork shows it, as it shows half her face in shadow. It's like
Yeah.
a two-face kind of thing. There's two sides here.
Mhm.
There's the shadowy character and the real character,
Mhm.
and they're probably in opposition to each other.
Yeah.
hmm
But yeah, so I really enjoyed this when you had settled on Suicide Squad. I was super excited because I've been looking for more excuses to read more of it. So, I thought it was really great. And what about Cartoonicus? Had you read Suicide Squad prior to this?
I mean, I read this issue for prep, but no, I had not read the actual comic ever before. My introduction to Suicide Squad was the animated version of Assault on Arkham, which was just about one of the weirdest and most awkward movies I've ever seen. So I did not care for that at all. I have two thoughts about this. One is that it ended kind of awkwardly and abruptly. I didn't care for how they just, did the job and then got out of there and that was it. And they never addressed like what happened with, Captain Boomerang, leaving what's her name, Mind Flayer,
Mind Boggler. Yeah.
Mind Boggler to die and all that. It's kind of depressing that the story starts out with like 500 people being slaughtered, and all we do is kill a couple of villains in the end. It's like,
Yeah.
man, where's the justice here?
Well, as they pointed out, the ones who did the killing, the most of the killing, they do end up dead, and the two biggest killers anyway.
That, like I said, that at least was nice, but it's like,
Yeah.
So the numbers are so off, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, remember, the mission goes bad too. They're supposed to capture President Marlowe, and because of Plastique's betrayal, they lose that.
Yeah.
They don't destroy the jihad, but they do cripple it. But it comes back to bite them. And when it does, the Jinn, the guy who is digitized and in a little device, they had to replace him because he's destroyed, and they replace him with a character named Ifrit, who is Mind Boggler. They digitized her before she died.
Oh my!
And so when she comes out, she's like, you left me to die.
Wow.
Okay.
So she gets her revenge. It's a lot later, but yeah.
The other thing, if we can go back to, actually no, we're already here. Move forward to where Amanda Waller is briefing them. And you said later on they ditched their costumes, which I've actually been intrigued to read. For now, the fact that they were all still going in their costumes, and most of the action came down to basically, superheroes, supervillains, but fighting supervillains, right? There's these one-on-one fights, which really didn't separate it that much from superheroes as a result. We just I found myself watching superhero fights. What really is interesting to me is knowing that during this briefing is really where most of the spy stuff that I noticed was actually happening, because here's where intelligence collecting is actually coming into play. Ironically, it's all happened off screen already, right? But they have all this information about so many of these people, exactly where to find them and who they are and everything, right? And it shows us that truth about spies in the end, especially in modern day, in an age of satellites and computer hacking and the NSA and everything, that the real spies are rarely somebody undercover out in the field. They're actually somebody sitting behind a computer analyzing endless amounts of data.
So now, before we started, Metal mentioned that he is not a big fan of the Suicide Squad, and I am interested to hear about why.
So I've actually read this before. Many moons ago, I read like the first year or so of the Suicide Squad. Like I've read more issues than I had to today. I barely remember them. I just remembered really not liking them at the time. I went back and reread the first two that we said we were going to talk about, and I started remembering why I didn't like them. And on top of that, I don't think I've ever engaged in any form of the Suicide Squad I actually liked. I think part of it is that I don't like the premise of the Suicide Squad. Like, I just don't think it's that interesting. I think the only character that's involved in this one particularly, and some of the other versions that I like, is Captain Boomerang. I find most of the other characters just aren't that interesting. Some of them outright insufferable. I've never liked Waller, ever. I can't think of a version of her I like, including this one. But those points aren't my criticism of the story. I hate the pacing of this story so much. It bothers me to no end. Part of it is the first time I read this, when I hopped into it, I had not read a lot of other DC Comics, right? Because I'm working backwards with how young I am. So maybe if you had been keeping up and reading a lot of stuff before this, the world feels fuller, right? You have a lot of the context going in, and I've got a lot of the context now that I'm older and I've read a lot more. This is just like the random bits and pieces that I end up reading when I was younger without having context. There's quite a bit of other stories you have to read for this one to really work. Going into it, this is not like you hand this to somebody and it's their first story type comic. There's a lot of context that's needed.
That's odd because that's exactly what happened to me, and I didn't feel like I needed any of it.
Yeah, and the other part too is, as you were even mentioning, where all the information is front loaded. There are certain parts of it where it feels more like a spy movie than a traditional espionage story. Right, like a spy action film, and they just unload all this information on you. So after that initial bit, which I do like the opening, I think the opening is really, really strong. And then we get to the Suicide Squad itself, and we spend like the bulk of a comic and even like almost the first half of the second one in what would otherwise be the first 15 minutes of a spy movie. And then the rest of the spy movie is condensed into the last half of the second comic in this one story. That I hate the pacing. Now, I do think,
yeah,
it is way too much exposition before we get to anything that's important. Part of it is because if you were introduced to these characters for the first time, we have to tell you who each of these characters are, and that takes a really long time. And then when we get to it after that, we have to start explaining the other guys, like your actual targets and everything that's going on too. And we're taking like several different comics worth of information and trying to condense it down right here in exposition.
Yeah. Well, these days,
I can imagine I would re-like what?
These two issues would be 6 issues nowadays.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, I even think like it could have even been 6 issues back then too, if we were in the middle of the story, like if this wasn't their first mission, right? Mm-hmm. I imagine I would like it a little bit more than I did the first time around if I got later into it. But as a start, this is a really rough and rocky start.
This is an issue we've often talked about with superheroes in general, and the problem with first issues being origin stories, and that there are a lot of franchise that will instead start off somewhere in the middle of the story and then later on do a couple flashbacks to show you how it went.
Yeah.
I also think like the Suicide Squad would be better if they weren't already established characters, right? I've thought about this a lot. I think it would be better if they were all just new characters made up purely for the Suicide Squad, and they were off-screened, thrown in jail. And then like throughout the series, you could have flashbacks on how they got caught by the established superheroes. I think you could write a richer story that way. I think the fact that they're all having to be connected into all of these other stories kind of makes it messier.
Yeah, that is where I'm saying I got off easy, because as someone who is, I probably read less superhero comics than anybody here, especially DC. For me, other than Captain Boomerang, I didn't know who any of these characters were. Right.
See, I have to disagree. I think the whole point is to take what are really minor characters, and Captain Boomerang is the worst Flash villain. I mean, Flash can pick bullets out of the air, and you're reading these stories where he shows up at a jewel thief. There's a jewel robbery, and Captain Boomerang standing there with a boomerang. Aha, Flash! And he talks for like 3 paragraphs. Then he throws a boomerang, and it's like Flash should have this guy in jail before he said word 2. It's just every story. It makes no sense that this guy is in any way a credible Flash villain, and he works better in Suicide Squad.
So basically, Suicide Squad is the villainous Avengers. Let's take a bunch of characters who can't hold their own story, but maybe they can work together.
Well, I don't necessarily
The
think that.
Avengers are.
Originally, yeah, every one of those was chosen because they I think their numbers were showing that nobody was interested in reading an individual title with them.
Oh, okay.
And so they threw them all together and they created, a legend was born.
Thor and Hulk were not interesting on their own
at the time.
Okay,
Well,
I didn't know that, but
yeah, I'm not upset on that. I know that's like where the JSA came from. Because they were trimming on the thing, but anyway, that's a somewhat different subject. I don't think it's a situation where they're like looking to use B characters that way. I think it was more that Ostrander wanted to do a spy book, and these are characters he could use because they weren't being used regularly by other people.
Right. Yeah, that's how it felt to me.
And so using the B characters allowed them to have that name recognition from people that were so they can look at crossover readers, because it's like, oh, what's this guy or this guy,
right?
And that's why, like, in Suicide Squad, you got several of the Charlton characters that showed up. Peacemaker, and of course a Nightshade that had places in other books, but they weren't the big draws. They didn't have Nightshade wasn't sustaining her own monthly.
This was a perfect place for Nightshade.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, and I wish she wasn't always trying to leave the team. It's like she's. I have to say, as somebody who read this pretty much, I think I read the entire run, or I gave up maybe in the last years, just from a financial standpoint. I wasn't able to, or something. I remember not liking one of the runs and kind of dropping it for a while. And then I went back and reread it, and I was like, oh, what was I thinking? So I got them like dollar, grab bins and things. I completed my collection. But as I mean, it's weird to hear you saying, I hate these characters. Like Deadshot becomes a 3-dimensional character as you read this. He was a very thin character before this started. I mean, he just had a few tiny appearances, and they turned him into something with this book. Captain Boomerang is way fleshed out in this book too. And
well, I said beforehand too, Captain Boomerang was actually the only thing I liked about these books.
Right.
I actually thought he was a fun character, and same with these characters. I didn't like them before the book, so I'm sure you are absolutely right that these books flesh them out. But I think there's also the handicap is like, why do I want to wait to watch these characters get fleshed out if I didn't like them before this book?
Right. But maybe
Like,
that's just giving them a second chance, right?
Sorry, what? What'd you say?
I was saying, but maybe that's just giving them a second chance.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the argument that you're going to take a few issues to get into some of these characters. You got to give the book a chance. I don't know what else to say, but June Moon's
it's easier to give it a chance now too.
Yeah,
but I can also imagine if I had to pay for these at the time and I didn't like it after 2 issues, I'm not paying for issue 3.
That is true.
Yeah,
like now
I think that's the thing is like it's to bash a couple of cliches together. While everybody's comic may be somebody's first comic, every comic may be somebody's first comic, not every comic is going to land with everyone. So
right.
I could definitely see, like you saying, I don't really like the pacing, but that's one of the things I really enjoyed about it. Right. I like the way the mission's laid out. And so you can see how it's supposed to go in your mind. And then when it doesn't go that way, then it's fun to watch it not work. So
I think I would have liked an actual like a side issue or something that flashes back, and I got to see what's her face? What's her actual name? Chimera, the Nightshade, right? I would actually see her in the mess infiltrating. I think that would have been more fun to read. Like her just like narrating, documenting everything that's happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did not have 6-issue stories back then. I mean, even a 3-issue arc was a big arc at the time, and it would
Really?
if they had taken 3 issues to do this first two-parter, it might be more interesting. At the same time, we were used to stories being done in one. And it's like this one's continued. Okay, well,
Well, I mean,
it
that's
took a
part of
long
my
time for
complaint,
us to
though,
get. Yeah, but it took a
right?
while for us to get to the end where it's like, okay, this is an incomplete story, but it'll be done in 3, 4, 5 stories.
Well, no,
Uh,
I'm saying the
yeah,
opposite though. Like part of this is the fact that this is a 2-story,
yeah,
where it took pretty much all the way until the second half of the second issue for it to really get into the meat of it.
Well, see, that's the part where
yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not, but I think that the planning is part of the meat,
Yeah.
right? Is because understanding the stakes and all that other kind of stuff. I think that's part of it. It's like if you look at the for comparison, maybe you haven't read it, but the first couple issues of Pellegrini and Lim's Black Hops is very heavy in the battle strategy kind of thing. And I really, really enjoyed the background and all that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of the readership that didn't care for that. And they said some of the same things that you put into that. But like for me, I really enjoyed that aspect of it and being able to dig down into the tactical side of it.
I don't dislike it. I just think like you're front loading your story so much, right? Like I think there are ways, especially if you're willing to jump around like back and forth with the pacing, using flash forwards and flashbacks, that you can explain the planning while also being in the thick of it at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the exposition is so heavy without visuals. They really are just walking around having meetings, and so it's talking heads instead of okay, this character Deadshot, and you see him like doing some shooting or something as they talk over who he is, instead of just a picture of his face, which is shown on the projector in the meeting that they're having. That is more realistic to give you more of a spy feel, because this is more of what it would be like. But if you're trying to get the reader interested, this does come off as very talky and you don't see much.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that. It may be the oddly enough, the way
it is a visual medium. You need to be using the visuals for the storytelling.
Do you remember the first the first Suicide Squad movie? How they really didn't know how to introduce the characters, so they tried 2-3 different ways, where they have like a logo, and then they have like very fast text with all the things that they've been accused of, and also what their abilities are, and they expect you to pause it, I guess, even though you're watching in the theater. And I mean, but it's all action packed. It's like, here's Deadshot, and it shows him in an action pose, and he's got a logo, and it's like they really do dump all this on you, but they do it in seconds rather than half a story.
And it's funny though, because I was going to point out that, at least from what I saw with some of them, they were showing us the flashbacks of their like backstories and actually going into that stuff rather than just talking about it in a board meeting.
I need to go and look at it again now.
Yeah, because like they show Harley's whole story, and she, Amanda Waller is narrating over it. And you're seeing
in the film.
Oh, you're talking about the film. I was about Harley's not in the. Okay.
Gotcha. Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about.
I was, and then you were okay. I got thrown off because I thought you were correcting me that they were doing that in the first issue.
No. I was saying the irony is that they do that in the movie.
Well, as somebody said here, they wanted to do a Harley Quinn movie without calling it Harley Quinn. Yeah. So yeah, it's way.
You think she the only one who got that treatment, perhaps?
Yeah,
I think. Finn says something rather interesting here and unexpected. That where is it? He says, I think the worst medium for spies is film. I would love to hear more about that. That is a very unusual take.
Jim Tudor has joined. Hello, Jim. Says, if you have to do half the story's exposition, you're doing something wrong.
Yes.
And I think that speaks to I definitely see that on it. But once again, because we're talking about the tactical side of it, I didn't really feel it was exposition in this so much as it was establishing what was supposed to happen, right? So, and
Well, I don't think that's actually even a problem in the story
Mhm.
if that was like the only wall of text, right?
Yep.
But the fact that we got like the tactics immediately after introducing all the character, and it's just
Yep.
like nonstop wall of text. It's like exposition into the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, like I said, I can definitely respect where you're coming from, and even though, like, I'm not, I don't, it didn't bother me. I really enjoyed it.
You'll notice that there's a trick they often do in movies where you'll hear someone's voiceover telling you what the plan while showing it actually happening later.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right? So
Especially
Yeah, and
high
that's kind of what I'm
school
talking
time
about.
that way.
Like if we're using flash forwards and flashbacks or whatever, we could have the action happening, and we could be juggling all of the information at the same time. You know, it takes a lot more forethought into writing your story. It's harder to juggle, but it keeps the audience's attention a little better most of the time. And it doesn't feel like the story's stalling ever.
Right.
The
There's-
one thing that I would have, the one thing I would question on how well that would work in this story is because, like, especially the second issue where they're specifically laying out the method of attack, right? It doesn't match what happens. So when in those
Yeah.
2 or 3
You'd have
pages
to
where
like
he's
show it
saying,
all falling apart.
right,
Yeah.
So,
right.
And as people have pointed out with making fun of heist movies, it's like, weren't we all briefed on the heist? And as we're about to start, the person's like, "Okay, you will go to this room and disable this." And it's like, shouldn't we have been talking about this back at the, at the plan? It's like, why are you telling me this now?
Well,
It's
you know
like,
what might help
obvious
for all of
exposition.
this
Yeah.
is an Oracle character.
Yeah.
Someone who can literally be in their ears at all times, and the conversation can always be happening as it's going.
well,
You
it's
do know
funny
that
that you
Oracle
mentioned
was
that.
created here, right? Oracle was created in Suicide Squad.
Wait, what?
Oracle was created in Suicide Squad.
Yeah, we just haven't gotten to that part yet.
Right.
Before
She-
Barbara Gordon was shot?
No. Barbara Gordon was shot and disappeared for a while, and then all of a sudden there's a hacker who is like communicating with their computer person at Suicide Squad, and this I think there's like half a. You don't get any hints about it until at one point they show the person from the back, and there's a little stuffed doll of Batgirl sitting next to her computer.
I gotta
And-
look this up. I didn't think Killing Joke was that old.
Killing Joke happened around the time that this started, 87.
Man, the artwork sure is different.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to praise. I really like the art in this. If I had to give it any compliment, I think the art is great. I even like, which I'm sure they probably use the same techniques for similar characters or the same ones in other contemporary books. But I liked how like Jin was basically almost made out of halftones or whatever. Like, he wasn't inked directly. I like a lot of the different effects that were used. I think the art is solid.
It just looks so much older than that in Killing Joke. It's so weird.
Let's see. It's a while. It takes a while to play out. It really does. It
Killing
takes a
Joke
long
is
time
88.
before. Okay, and it's like 2-3 years into this before Oracle is there talking, and then it's finally revealed when the computer lady at Suicide Squad is killed, and they have to tell Oracle, and then Oracle turns around in her chair and is sobbing, and you can see it's Barbara Gordon, and it takes a long time before she's brought in on the Suicide Squad, and this is before Birds of Prey. This is where it was invented that she was good at computers, and their name's Oracle, and it's really interesting because Ostrander, I think before he did this, he was working on Firestorm, and I don't know if you ever read Firestorm, but way back when Ron Raymond was created, he had a bully, kind of a friend, kind of a bully, who would occasionally pick on him, named Cliff Carmichael. He had weird hair and goofy glasses, and he it turns, and like around issue 50 of Firestorm, he actually tries to kill Ron Raymond by cutting the strap on his football helmet. And it's revealed that he's a sociopath. And so that is like, they turn him into the new Thinker, because the Thinker was killed in Suicide Squad. And by the way, when they introduced Thinker and Weasel in the second Suicide Squad movie, I thought for sure that they were going to play out the whole thing that happened between those characters in the comics, and then they just turned out to be, like, completely unrelated to that. But anyway, so Thinker was killed off, but they still had his helmet, and Cliff Carmichael takes parts of it and puts it in his brain, and he becomes the new Thinker. And then he chases down Barbara Gordon to kill her. And it's a really intense two-parter. And I think that's around issue 50. So if you want to read that, it's somewhere around issue 49, 50.
I am very interested, yeah. I put up a screenshot here of The Killing Joke, because I can only assume that being a graphic novel, it must have had a much higher budget than this normal comic is, because look how different that is.
Well, it was
the
different
coloring.
Yeah, this is a prestige format comic. Yeah.
So it was printed on glossy stock. It was never intended for newsprint. So,
in '88, it was on glossy. Wow.
Yeah. DC started doing some stuff on glossy in '87, maybe '86, but I think it's '87.
Well, The Dark Knight, which was later called The Dark Knight Returns, was like the first prestige format comic, I think, and that was like '86. So I don't know what's glossy and what's not, but yeah, that's when they started the prestige format stuff.
Right.
So I did some looking up, though, timeline stuff. So The Killing Joke and the Batgirl special were both in 1988. And then Barbara Gordon was introduced as Oracle in Suicide Squad in '89. And then it was revealed that it was Barbara in '90. So Oracle started showing up in '89, in 23, in Suicide Squad number 23, and then it was revealed to be Barbara Gordon in 38 in 1990. So it's basically 2 years after The Killing Joke.
I just sent you a link that you can show issue 49, where the cover, because if you like Killing Joke, you'll like the cover to Suicide Squad 49, because Ed is yeah.
Well, now, I never said I liked anything about The Killing Joke, mind you.
Well, right, yeah, I that's true. I'm just saying I like the artwork in The Killing Joke more than anything else. It's little. I mean, it's a little out of character. Not just the gun, but the fact that she has handles on her wheelchair. But that took a while for them to develop. So this is the one where Cliff Carmichael is hunting her down, and it is pretty awesome. And,
I like that a member of the Bat family is actually willing to wield a gun. Bravo.
Yeah. Well, she's a her dad's a cop, and I'm sure she was around firearms a lot, and I kind of like that. Alfred has always been more of a gunman, at least as Chuck Dixon and others wrote him.
We all know and love that one moment, right, with the shotgun where he's like, "You won't find such pleasantries from me."
Right.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. I forget what issue that is, but yeah, that's a good moment. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's it for me. I really love Suicide Squad. I think the entire first run is basically an espionage comic, off and on. Every now and then it really goes into super heroics, but most of the characters that they bring in, especially when they bring in what's his name, Count Vertigo, and they also brought in Poison Ivy back when she was kind of being neglected as a character, and made those two the fixtures on the team from, like, I'd say issue 40 onward, and that's where where Amanda Waller kind of gets away from being government and they become free agents. But that is great. But the I thought it was really amazing because the Count Vertigo has a, what do you call it, the um not dual personality, what's it called, the where you're happy and then you're depressed.
Oh, bipolar.
He's bipolar. And he actually has a moment where he turns to Deadshot and says, I really want to end my life, but I just can't bring myself to do it. If I asked you, would you do it? And he's like, no problem.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say.
be sure that you want to if you ask me. And
No
that is how
takesies, backsies.
that's how they end the book. They actually, the last page of Suicide Squad is that Count Vertigo says, will you come with me? And they go off onto some grass, and and he says, so are you sure you want to do this? And he pulls out his gun, aims it at Count Vertigo, and a bunch of panels go by, and he says, no. And the two of them walk off together.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I say, Deadshot really grows as a character. When they made him Will Smith in the movie and gave him a daughter, I'm like, they did not study this character at all.
Actually, he had a daughter in the Assault on Arkham I was talking about.
He had a son who was molested and kidnapped and molested and died.
Ooh.
And yeah, and his marriage fell apart, and I don't remember all the backstory they gave him, but there was a Deadshot story where they revealed that a girlfriend of his had a kid of his that he didn't know about, and that's what the mini series was about. I guess they so then somebody was like, oh, so he has a daughter. Oh, that's nice. And it's like, no, he's not a nice character. It was a good series, but I'm just saying somebody, in choosing to make Will Smith Deadshot, they did not study much. They kind of made their own thing and called him Deadshot.
The way it was portrayed in Assault on Arkham was clearly that he almost never gets to see her, and he's desperate for money so that he can actually raise her properly.
Yeah, I think Assault on Arkham was made right around the time that they made the movie, the live action movie. Kind of.
No, I think I saw it at least a couple of years before that.
Possibly, I don't know. It's any Suicide Squad that has Harley Quinn on it is not real Suicide Squad to me. So I'm sorry. Harley Quinn is just a character who worked really well as the Joker's henchwoman, and they've never made her that.
Well, I mean, yeah, we had an entire stream about that.
Yes, we did, and so but not everybody watches every stream. So yeah.
Well, that's what we need with comics have, right? Where we have we talked about this in stream 32.
Who wants to put that together?
You know, that would be really great if YouTube still had its old annotation system, and then we could just put the link to it right there on the screen as we're talking about it. But YouTube decided it wanted to be a lot of turds and not make a new version of it that worked in HTML5 or Java, just because they were getting rid of Flash. But the old annotation system was so much superior to whatever the heck they have now. I think you could put 5 cards in there.
Yeah.
Well, you could put a card that appears at the moment that we're talking about it, but that pops up in the corner of the screen. People will miss it or whatever. It's not as good. It's not as good as a big bold annotation that could pop up right on the screen.
Yeah. Although I found those really annoying.
New 52 was when Harley Quinn became the face of Suicide Squad. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. It's also around the time she became the red and blue cheerleader,
roller derby chick.
Yeah. So. It's just none of that works for me. Sorry.
No, I agree. I don't understand the appeal in the character as a whole. I think the only time that Harley Quinn's been done decently that wasn't in the animated series was in Batman White Knight, and she's an entirely different character in that.
Yeah. She's really good in the Arkham games, but the Arkham games are just a successor to the animated series, so she's basically the same character.
Yep. So, well, guys, it is. Oh my gosh, we've been at this 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It's a long
Have I
one.
convinced? Have I
Now let's
convinced
talk
anyone
about
to go
Super
look up
Spy.
Suicide Squad?
No.
Well, I'm convinced, but I was already on Team Suicide Squad.
I think if not for the Oracle stuff alone, I may check that out.
Yep.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I definitely want to pick that stuff up. Anyway, that's the show. Theoretically, tentatively, next week we're going to be talking about sports comics and why America doesn't really do them, and that'll be a topic conversation for next week. Hopefully, we'll have some new special guests who haven't been here, not new, but haven't been here in a while. We'll see if we can make it work. And Jim Tuner says, no, we don't care about Suicide Squad. Give us more Tom King Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah, I know.
Listen,
he's
man, you're
serious
trying to
when he
turn the
says
panel
that.
into a we're committing Suicide Squad.
Oh.
Can you make us large? Get rid
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
picture of Alfred, because nobody can see me behind there. If we're saying goodbye while I'm covered by Jim Tuner's quote,
Sorry, that's me being a
I just
bad
want to
host.
say goodbye.
So, okay, I think that is it. Everything. I will promise. I will say, guys out there in internet land, within the next month, I expect more Forces pages to go out there. Just a little. My life is taking some changes, and hopefully more time for making comics again. I'm hoping. So, anyway, that's all I got though. We're gonna wrap the show, and next week, hopefully, sports. Go team! You guys have a good night.